Okay, we have to be on good behavior now.
Right.
No, you don't. Please be just yourselves. Give me a break.
I'm not sure I can be on good behavior anymore.
Just be yourself, really. Yay, I have on the honor of having, did I say that right? I have the honor of having on Erin and Maria from PEC, partnersforethicalcare.com. And I wanted to have them on because they recently both wrote their own books about, well, I want y'all to talk about it. Whoever wants to take the reins. I'm just excited to have you guys on and talk about that because I love what y'all do. And I think writing a book is one of the best ways to, I don't know, provide a resource for parents or whoever to, especially the parents thing. Like, I just adore what you guys do. It's so important. So,
thanks,
Maria,
Lindsay.
why don't you go first since your book is directed towards parents?
Well, I was actually going to say you should go first because your book is newest. Yours is newly out.
Whose birthday is next?
Maria.
That would be me. Okay. This is my book, Desist, Detrans, and Detox, Getting a Child Out of the Gender Cult. And I wrote this because so many parents are struggling with this issue. PEC hears from parents almost daily who the stories are always the same. My child just announced this transgender identity out of the blue. I don't know where this came from. This is, completely out of left field. And so we've been trying to provide some guidance, provide a roadmap. There just hasn't been a roadmap for parents for how to cope with this. And we found ourselves, just repeatedly giving the same kind of advice, like, hey, this is a cult. You need to treat it like a cult. You need to cut off the trans juice. Well, how do we do that? Well, that's really what the book is about, is how to cut off the trans juice so you can get your child back from the cult. So that's what that book is about. And what we're hoping to achieve is to just give parents an option other than affirmative or affirmation only, because that's what the gender industry says, that you must affirm, you have to agree with the child that yes, they are transgender, you've got to medicalize them. And no, all roads do not lead to the gender clinic. There's another path, and we're going to offer that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm so glad that Maria wrote the book, because one of the things that just is so sad for me, and I again had a discussion this morning with someone about it, is the idea that somebody who's gender nonconforming should go down this medicalized path. And it's just heartbreaking to me that that's sort of the accepted narrative now, that if you're gender nonconforming, you're transgender. I can't think of anything more sort of that undermines the rights that women have been fighting for all this time than to tell them if they don't adhere to rigid, regressive gender stereotypes, they're actually born in the wrong body. So I'm really grateful for Maria's book, and it's been a great resource for parents who have children struggling with this.
Oh, thanks, Erin. And I am grateful for your book that just came out this week as we're taping. And it's getting great reviews. So tell us about your book.
Okay, and I'll show a picture too.
I'll just take a back seat. I'm like, hey, these ladies got this.
We talk a lot, Lindsay.
Yeah, we do. So my book is Always Erin, and it's actually a children's book. And when I first sort of thought about writing my story, I never thought about writing it in a children's book style, because my story is somewhat disturbing. My trans identity developed as a result of a pretty brutal sexual assault, which is not something that you generally want to tell children about. So I was trying to figure out how to tell this story in a way that children could identify with, but that wouldn't freak them out. And also to just give them the information that just because they're uncomfortable in their body and that something's happened that makes them feel like they want to be somebody else doesn't mean that they're inherently flawed, and that they should go ahead and transition. That there's ways to learn to manage those uncomfortable feelings so that they can grow up in a healthy body and not direct all that shame and hatred inward and medicalize their otherwise healthy body. And I think that that's the point that both Maria and I just keep coming back to, is that this isn't about kids, taking on sort of teenagers are known for sort of bucking the system and doing things that are kind of countercultural. And if that's all this was about, we wouldn't be so concerned. But these medical interventions are so incredibly scary and dangerous for kids. And the information that they're getting, that if they don't adhere to these regressive stereotypes, they're actually born in the wrong body. It's damaging for both boys and girls. And so I had a wonderful illustrator who worked with me on this. I'll just sort of kind of click through this a little bit.
I love it. It's so cute.
Yeah, the illustrator's Bartleby, who wanted to remain anonymous. But there's some of the pictures, which I think is just the first page, just to sort of give you an idea of how this story progresses. It says, "When I was a little girl, 2 men hurt me. I was scared that might happen again. I thought the hurt happened because I was a girl. I decided not to be a girl anymore." So that's sort of how the story starts.
Mm-hmm.
It goes through the struggles that I had, and I did have pretty significant struggles when I was a kid. And it took a while for me to work them through. But the last page is sort of one of just hope and healing. So as you can see, the last page here has, I don't know if you can tell who all those people are, but they're sort of leaders in the area, in the movement. So we have Vaishnavi, we have Alex, who does the gender mapping, Magdalene Burns, Beth Stelzer, who does the Save Women's Sports.
Yep.
And so it ends sort of by me recognizing that I am a girl and that it's okay to be a girl. And I think that's a message that we really need to give, because as I talk to detransitioners, I'm finding out so many of them decided to transition because of similar stories to mine, that they had been hurt by somebody and thought, if I just become a boy, that won't happen.
I love that you are not sugarcoating it and, saying what happened. I think that's also like really important. I've heard, I don't have kids yet, but I've always heard, it's better to not talk to your kids like they're like, just like they're babies, even though they're pretty smart humans, really. So I love that you just said it. And I think that's really powerful. And I find that a lot of people, especially something so serious like that, sexual assault or abuse or rape, is such a, people carry so much shame and self-blame. And like that is telling the world that happened to you, even though it wasn't anything that you really did, is such a vulnerable thing to do. So I really commend you for doing that. That's, I think, such an important thing to state, because that, I think, is such a widely... It's a problem, like a massive problem. And all of a sudden something happens to you and you've never heard of it, especially at a young age when that can happen. Then of course you don't have anything to go off of. It's just like, oh my God, it's my fault. I don't know. I guess it's just a human condition thing. I haven't really studied it, but I
think there is just so much shame around it, especially if you're little. And it's so confusing, because one of the things that happens with sexual assault that often isn't talked about is that sometimes it will hurt and be very scary and awful, but it's also a sexual feeling that can kind of feel good. So it's a very confusing thing, very confusing. And when I first thought about writing about this, again, I thought, oh, I don't want to do anything to scare children. This is such a serious subject. But then when I think about people reading Jazz Jennings' book, I Am Jazz, to little kids, I think, wow, what could be scarier than telling a child that they could be born in the wrong body? I mean, that's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers stuff. I thought if that's going to be celebrated in the classroom, then there needs to be a counter narrative to it. And so I'm hoping that people will be receptive to it, and it might, people might realize, oh my gosh, I think a lot of people have no concept that there are people that children can develop gender dysphoria as a result of a whole myriad of causes. And Maria, I don't know if maybe you want to talk about that, because you mentioned it a lot in your book, that the various things that can kind of cause a child to develop a transgender
Can I say
identity.
one thing? I'm also really happy that you did choose to do a children's book, because I've seen so many indoctrination tools, like the Jazz Jennings ones. The Brenda is I want to say Brenda's a wolf, because Brenda is a freaking wolf, but it's Brenda's a sheep. And it's just, there's so many disgusting children's books. So I'm really glad that you are like, I'm just going to add the real truth to this pile of crap. So I love that you did that. That's really important. Thank you. So,
well, I love too about your book. There's a lot of gender critical books coming out, but a lot of them are pretty saccharine. And they're pretty light, they're pretty fluffy, quite a few coming from a religious perspective. And I don't think they're really tackling the issues. I think they're a little bit too bubblegum, I'm afraid, for what's really going on. So I appreciate that you took on a really tough issue and you addressed it in a really tender but powerful way. And I think this book deserves awards, and I hope that your book gets some awards. But yeah, addressing the reasons why kids suffer gender dysphoria is really important. And one of the things that I suggest parents really need to do as they're starting to try to extricate their kids from this is figure out why their kids got sucked into it in the first place. Yeah. The cult is feeding a need. There's some vulnerability in the child. If they've gotten drawn into it, there's something that they lack or that they perceive that they lack. And the cult is offering that falsely, but it's offering it. And so sexual trauma or any kind of trauma is a huge one. Kids are suffering, they're feeling wounded, they're feeling damaged. And one of the things that Erin has taught me that I didn't appreciate before, but as I was working on my book and Erin and I were kicking around ideas, she expressed to me that people who've been through trauma very often dissociate. And it's where your mind kind of steps out of your body. Like, I can't cope with what's happening to my body, so my mind's going to leave my body for a bit. That's what gender ideology is. It's encouraging dissociation from your body. It's saying your body and your mind are different things and they can be mismatched, which, as Erin said earlier, that's a horrible thing to teach a child, that your mind and your body could be at odds with one another. So yeah, trauma is a big precursor. A lot of these kids we're finding, detransitioners, have trauma in their past. Autism is enormous. And I don't want to belabor and go into all the reasons why, but there are some very specific symptoms that come with autism that lend themselves very well to accepting the lie. The reason
can you
that
go
you
into
feel...
it if you don't want to? But I'm like, I haven't had anyone on that's talked about that yet, and I'm intrigued by it too. So I had some random follower reach out to me, say that she has worked with autistic people. She only lasted a month. Everyone that works with them, first of all, she framed it and not like it's so exhausting and terrible. I mean, she was very compassionate, and she's like, they're just thinking on a total different, I hate using the word spectrum, but they're still, humans who just think differently. And she said everyone that worked in that, with autistic people are just exhausted. It's emotionally exhausting and obviously very frustrating. She only lasted a month. She was like, I couldn't handle it. I was like, that says a lot. I can't even imagine adding this fake gender. I think gender dysphoria is a thing that is real, but it becomes real because they put a name to it. I think it's kind of a twisted way of using maybe something that was traumatic, and then I'm not sure how to describe that. I'm not trying to make it be like, it doesn't exist, because it very clearly does exist, but I think that they, I guess, have named it differently now. I'm not sure how to describe that. Actually,
I actually would call
Hashi,
it
or how do you, I don't know how you say his name?
Hashi,
yeah, said it really well. Yeah, they said it very well. I forgot how it's said, but I'm not going to repeat it. But it was a really hot take, a very controversial take technically, because people don't like hearing that stuff. And I'm like, dude, I agree. Sorry.
If I were to name it, I would probably call it gender identity dissociative disorder. That's what I would call it, because it is that dissociation from self. And like you said, it does. I think one of the reasons that autistic kids, especially those who are high functioning autistic, are really vulnerable to it is because autistic kids tend to be very black and white in their thinking, which means, something's either right or wrong, true or false, male or female. And so if they have, if they're gender nonconforming, rather than conceptualizing their identity as gender nonconforming, they say, oh, well, I'm not a boy, I must be a girl, or vice versa. For girls, especially with autism, they tend to have a difficult time socializing. And so they don't have the strengths that are typically associated with girls, and often they have strengths that are associated with boys. And so again, it's really easy for them to think, oh my gosh, the reason I'm having such a hard time fitting in is because I'm born in the wrong body. And so one of the concerns that I think Maria and I and others in this movement have is that transgenderism is being sort of offered up as a panacea to any
Yeah.
any problem that you have. Oh, you're not fitting in. It's because you're born in the wrong body. Oh, you're having trouble at school. It's because you're born in the wrong body. They're giving kids false hope that transitioning is going to solve all the problems. And we're finding that these kids are devastated when they transition, and then they realize they've got all the same problems they had before, plus medical problems because their bodies have been damaged. And Maria, I'm sure you have even more insights because you've worked with kids with autism.
Yeah, no, you covered that really well. You hit a couple of the really big things around autism, that the social differences of just, they recognize they don't fit in, and they're looking for an explanation for that. And as Erin said, transgenderism is now offered as the explanation for anything that you're uncomfortable with. The black and white thinking is huge. Another issue, a lot of times autistic kids have sensory issues. If you've ever been around an autistic kid, they've got to have certain kind of clothes. Many of them. Maybe the tag in their shirt bothers them. They've got to wear certain sorts of shoes. Compression, and this is something else that I learned talking with Erin. Compression helps autistic kids. If you've ever seen Temple Grandin's movie about her life, she created this, she called it a squeeze box, and it's like what they do with cows. They put the cattle in the squeeze box to calm them, and she found that calmed her. And I think she was a pioneer in the compression movement. Autistic kids will often use weighted blankets so that they can sleep better, compression shirts. And Erin had the thought that perhaps the reason autistic girls are drawn to the chest binders is because of the compression they provide.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Isn't that
Makes total
fascinating?
sense. Yeah.
So there's
100%.
a lot of those things with the high functioning autistic kids that they say, well, you know what? I really don't feel like I fit in with people. I like tight clothes. Oh yeah, you're transgender. That's what they get told. Puberty can seem just like a disaster to a transgender person who doesn't like change, because transgender.
You mean an autistic?
I'm sorry, autistic. Yeah, sorry. Thanks. Autistic people don't like change. They like things to stay the way they are. They like to know what to expect. Puberty hits, that's like the biggest change that's ever happened in your life. Yeah. And then these kids are told, oh, you're uncomfortable with puberty? Well, that means you're transgender. We'll give you some puberty blockers. That'll help with that. It's awful. It's just hideous.
Yeah. And it's really hitting the most vulnerable children. And that's what I think is so infuriating to me, is that, children like me who experience something incredibly traumatic, who deserve to have appropriate mental health services, are being denied those interventions and instead being told that they're inherently flawed, that the self-shame they have is appropriate, that the only solution is to damage their bodies. And they're completely being let down by us because we're not offering them. In some places, they're even banned from getting therapy that would help them understand the underlying issues. And these therapy bans are really concerning because they've conflated, the horrible reparative therapies that took place, for gay people and this transgender identity. And that's one of the things that's so infuriating about this movement, is that they just sort of slap the T onto the LGB. And there's really nothing similar between LGB and T. They're completely different things. Yeah. But the T sort of hitched their wagon to the LGB and became, kind of untouchable. We're not allowed to critique it as a result of that.
Overshadows the rest that paved the path. It's ridiculous. Riding in the coattails.
Oh, and the other thing that's just so infuriating, this is a little tangential, but because they've done that, because of their ideology that our genitals don't determine our sex, our feelings do, they're now actually undermining a lot of the advances that the LGBT movement made, because they're insisting that lesbians accept a man who identifies as a woman as a lesbian. How insulting. Like, oh my gosh. I just find that just horrifying, that lesbians are being told that they're bigots and that they're hateful if they will not have sex with a woman who has a penis. In other words, a man. By definition, they're lesbians. They don't have sex with men. And it almost reminds me of reparative rape, where they're being told they have to have sex with men.
How is it not?
Yeah.
It's literally coercion, guilting someone into a sexual act. I mean, that's rapey. Isn't that what rape is?
It's very rapey.
What the hell?
It's extremely rapey. And it's really disturbing, because these are, men who are bullying women into having sex. And it's being celebrated as, authentic and brave and stunning.
And the women are being vilified and called hateful, bigoted, all these awful names. Yeah.
And sometimes they're being
Pointing out the
fired.
obvious.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
really.
I'm tired of this whole like for people stating the obvious of, no, women don't have penises. If someone's a
The fact that
lesbian,
we
I
say
don't.
these things.
I know exactly. It's so insulting, and yet we get called hateful and bigots for that. And I've just learned to really not give into that. Some random person on Twitter, and I'm like, no, it's just I state, women are women, men are men. Women don't have penises, men don't have vaginas, and you can never have vaginas. I don't even call it the neo vagina. I'm like, that's really insulting. I say it's a hole. It's a
hole. It's a surgical wound, is what it is.
Yeah. I'm just tired of that. They just project all the time. Everything that they say, not everything, but quite frequently, the stuff that they spew is exactly what they're doing. It is such a mind F. Like, I'm trying not to cuss here. It is like, what? Are you serious?
Yeah.
They really are revealing a lot. They show their cards so much, so often. It's like that they're almost reaching that point. I forgot, there's like a million phrases and stuff that goes around on the internet. They'll say things where it's like, yes, you get it. Oh, you almost have it. I can't think of an example of that because there's so many.
And Maria taught me the term Darvo, which I hadn't heard before.
Oh, yeah.
It very much explains what's happening because, I'm seeing all these people who, they claim to be tolerant and loving. And I'm like, and then you send me rape threats because you don't like my opinion on this, because you don't like the fact that I don't accept that men have penises. So basically you're bullying me for not privileging. Yeah. For not.
I know. This is exactly.
I know.
No, this goes right in line with, that's very intentional. I think all of this language thing is so intentional to trip us up. So to confuse you into being coerced. I think it's very intentional.
But we're basically being told we have to privilege men's feelings over our rights and protections by the very group that says that they're fighting for, for women's rights and for other groups' rights. And I'm like, this privileging of men's feelings over, our rights and protections is just infuriating. And again, I'm not surprised so many girls are saying, well, I'm just going to identify out of being a woman and I'm going to say I'm a man.
Especially
because,
now. Good Lord.
Oh, yeah. So Maria, I don't know if you want to explain Darvo, if there's anybody else out there who hasn't ever heard of that term, because I think it really encapsulates exactly what the trans movement is doing.
Yeah, it's abuser behavior. DARVO stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and oppressor. So, the abuser hits you and then says, I didn't hit you, you hit me. You started it, I didn't start it. That's the denying. Attacking, you say to your abuser, hey, I really didn't like what you just said to me. And the abuser just comes at you. You're the one who's always hurting me. You're the one who's always, doing everything that you shouldn't do. And then reverse victim and oppressor. That's absolutely what's happening here. These men are saying, oh, we're so damaged. We're so hurt. We're so wounded. I think, was it Kara Dansky who said only men could oppress women for thousands and thousands of years and then turn around and call themselves the most oppressed people in society?
Yep.
And that's just classic Darvo. Like, no, you're not oppressed. I'm oppressed. You're
and
the
actually
one
more
me.
oppressed and deal with,
And if you speak about your oppression, you're actually even more oppressive. So you're not even allowed to speak about your oppression.
How dare you speak? Ugh.
So I'm certainly I'm no expert in Darvo, but I came across that term at some point and I realized that's exactly what's happening here. Exactly what this activism is all about.
Yeah. 100%.
It's got to be so confusing for kids. That's what I just keep thinking is that, they're telling kids that their gender isn't based on their sex and they can change their sex, because it used to be they were trying hard initially to pretend like gender and sex were different and that they sort of shame us for being stupid for not understanding that. But more and more they're talking about as if they're synonymous, and they're trying to legislate so that you can declare your sex on your birth certificate to be whatever it is you want it to be.
Whatever your magical identity.
And that you shouldn't have to justify it because it's your innate feeling about who you are that can actually somehow be different from what you are biologically. That's an incredibly confusing thing for a kid to understand. And these kids are being taught at a really young age that they should go home, think about it, and determine their gender. And subsequently their sex and what sex-based rights they have and where they get to insinuate themselves. It's incredibly confusing to me. And as you said, even as we talk about it, we get confused because it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We start to say things like, men don't have, or women don't have,
I know.
or men don't
You
have.
have to literally think really hard about it. Exactly. I mean, listen, when I first.
Pronoun.
Yeah.
Lindsay, the whole pronoun.
Oh, it's okay.
Thing.
No.
Like,
yeah.
What do we call? What do we call? Is that a him? Is that a her? Wait, is that a man who's trying to be a woman, or a woman who's trying to be a man? Reading newspaper articles, you don't even know what you're reading anymore because it's so ridiculous. But I was going to say about the whole conflating sex and gender. I remember in the beginning, they tried to say, no, they're two separate things. Sex and gender are two separate things. But now they're not saying that anymore. And we just listened in. We joined an event at the University of Minnesota State Moorhead.
Like a Zoom thing?
Yeah. It was
I don't know how you guys do that. I've seen those invites and I'm like, I can't stomach it. I'm going to lose my mind. You guys are so brave, or just like, I don't even know. I'm just.
Oh, this one though, you would have loved to be there. Anybody who asked any kind of question that at all questioned the narrative got booted off the call immediately. Yeah. That happened to me once. But this guy who thinks he's a woman or is presenting as a woman made this statement that after gender reassignment surgery, that the cells actually become vaginal cells. I'm like, this is the most magical, mystical thing I've ever heard of. So
wow,
Dr.
New science.
Lockstock,
Can you believe that?
And the other thing that did, Maria, is it suggested that most of these men have had genital surgery. And the fact is, most of them haven't. Yeah. Most of the men who are insisting that they're women want to keep their penis intact because they're getting sexually aroused by going into women's spaces and impersonating women. And I think that's something that we just need to keep saying loudly and clearly, that these are not men who have had such debilitating gender dysphoria all their lives that they've had to go and get their penis cut off. Boo-hoo. These are men, and there are men like that. They tend not to be the ones who are saying, we get to be in women's sports, we get to be in women's locker rooms, we get to go to women's rape shelters. The ones who actually have the debilitating gender dysphoria and went through the surgeries aren't the ones who are saying that. It's the autogonophiles who are getting sexually aroused, who oftentimes have a lot of real hatred for women. And they want to keep their cells intact because that's where they're getting their sexual gratification from.
You said in the beginning, or earlier on, they conflated gender and sex, and I'm wondering what you define as like not necessarily the beginning, I guess, like kind of the beginning, or when they said that.
Oh gosh, well I think Erin, that was you that talked about them conflating gender and sex. I've been in this fight for about 3 years, but when did that flip, really?
And it does seem like it's been very insidious. It's been this very gradual thing because I just watched, I've been watching different legislative hearings, trying to really, understand what's going on. Yeah. And I just watched one Idaho hearings about birth certificates. And it's, the language is so slippery because they come in there and they say they want to change their gender markers on the birth certificate, which kind of, whatever. What's a gender marker? I don't know what a gender marker is, but that's what they want to change. And then they'll get into it talking about the gender marker and how important it is for people to be able to be authentic and how much discrimination there is because people, don't accept them for what they are. And then they gradually say, so we need to change the birth certificates to reflect the actual sex. And so it's this sort of very gradual thing. The problem is I've asked so many different people to define gender, and nobody can do it without doing a circular definition, because gender is sort of this artificial term that makes no sense. And originally gender was sort of a sanitized word we used for sex because sex is it has two meanings.
We're a little too Puritan. Yeah.
And so they started using gender as a synonym for sex. But now, and this is something that we're seeing all over the place in the UN, in our legislation. The Supreme Court has even suggested this might be the case, that gender and sex can be switched out. So if we have sex-based protections, they are now gender-based protections, which means we don't really have sex as a category anymore.
It seems like no one has really thought about, okay, this sounds good, let's do this, but let's think about how this could be bad. It's like they haven't even remotely considered men and women's bathrooms and showers and changing rooms. Fuck it. Like, what do you mean? How do you not see this? Oh, are you saying all transgender, trans identifying males are predators? I'm like, no, but to say that all of them could not be is utterly ridiculous. You really think men would go years to this experience and invert their penis, whatever? I'm like, yes, of course they would.
That's what's so frustrating is I can't tell you how many times people have said, oh, who would do that? Nobody would go through this much effort in order to do this. It's ridiculous. Why would anybody go through that much effort? And I'm like, do you know any predators? Have you read any stories about predators? Do you understand how predators think? Predators do whatever they can to gain access to vulnerable people. And so, simply saying they identify as a woman throwing on a dress and lipstick is nothing. I mean, that's nothing. There's like
technically they don't even need to do anything because
right. Technically,
this one guy was wild. He was like, I think he's a gay man. It was so confusing. He was like, I don't need to present femininity to you because that is a patriarchal thing brought on by the porn industry and blah, blah, blah. So I don't owe it to you. And I was like, oh, that's so wild. They use this thing that men have put on women and they're taking it back. And I'm like, it just blows my brain. I'm like, what is this? This is insanity.
I had a high school teacher who he's older than I am. I'm in my early 50s. He's older than I am. So he's been teaching for a while. And he's a big trans rights advocate. Every time I see him, he's got a Stand Up for Trans Kids t-shirt on. And we were at a school board meeting. And during a break, I was talking to him. And I was expressing this, like, no, I'm not saying transgender kids are dangerous. I'm saying there are predatory men who will take advantage of these policies. And he said, no high school boy would ever pretend to be trans to go into the girls' bathroom. I'm like,
this guy sounds red flaggy to me. He sounds defensive about, I check his hard drives and also, nah, dude. It's just when someone's very defensive, I'm like, that's saying a lot. I think that that's another card revealing thing where it's like, okay, I think maybe you want to do that. I don't know. It's weird. I also see there's so many angles to all this, but of course, older AGP men, autogynephiles, are gonna, be like, yes, kids are actually dysphoric and trans because then it'll normalize their freaking fetish. I'm
and
like,
that's
what?
That's
where
that's where I think all of this is coming from is that it's autogonophilic men who are trying to push this so it normalizes it.
Started this shit, are they not?
Yeah, and isn't it wonderful? You can not only that, but for any men who happen to be attracted to the shape of young boys, we give these kids puberty blockers so they don't develop into all of, exactly.
Emaciated, depressed, like how gross. I mean, it literally stunts your, I mean, here's the thing, puberty blockers, I don't technically know what it does to the body, but I know that your body doesn't grow to what it's really supposed to be getting to, whatever level. I don't know really the science behind it.
Well, it retards everything. So your mental development, your emotional development, it stunts you. I actually saw this interview by this one boy who started taking them when he was 13, which is actually older than they often prescribe them. And he said he felt like he was just frozen. Like emotionally, he could tell his friends were kind of moving past him and he was just sort of blocked in time. And I'm like, who thinks this is a good idea?
Keep them dumb and unwilling or unknowing. There's some interesting thing about Legos recently, and it blew my mind, and I saw right through it. So there's these things that have been going around, because Legos introduced as like inclusivity, rainbow, and then the trans rainbow on the side, and then BLM on the other side. Which by theory, if you don't know anything that we know, we're like, oh, yay, colors. Like, I love colors. I have a freaking rainbow tattoo and a unicorn tattoo on my arm. So people have been putting around, these images of like Lego ads from like the 70s or 60s or 50s. And it's like a little girl in, I think, overalls or just like, gender nonconforming clothing, nothing pink, nothing purple, nothing girly. And just as like, look what I made. Like, I remember old school Legos and it was just like,
we didn't have pink Legos. We didn't have.
Well, they're also, the Lego sets now only have you can only make a stall or a castle in only one way because there's only like a couple of pieces that are the real old school Lego pieces, which is just those squares. Now they have like structures like that aren't Legos. So it actually also forces you to only create one thing. Also, some girl reached out to me and said, something about the new Legos. It's basically this concept of you don't have to think beyond what you really could be thinking. So I think it's really on purpose to keep kids from expanding and growing their minds, keep them dumb so you can further manipulate them. I'm like,
Mm.
oh,
That's so scary when you describe that, because when those kits, the
mean,
Lego kits started coming out, I was like, well, what's the point? Like,
Mm.
what's the point
Oh,
of
yeah.
Legos if you're going to
Yeah.
be like
That's,
directed
yes, that's
how
what
to
I'm
make them?
saying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
Legos used to be just the blocks, all right? Now it has all these like doors and like curved pieces where you can really only make that thing that's on the box. And I'm like, if I was a kid, like I've always loved like not making what it tells me to do. I love thinking beyond what I see. And I mean, I see Legos doing it in a way to keep kids from like critically thinking or thinking, really growing their minds, keeping them small-minded to go in. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Do what we tell you to do. Just do what we tell you to do,
Yeah.
and that's it. Yeah.
You won't have to think much of it.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
it is. It really
It is
does seem
heartbreaking.
like that's sort of where things are, we're trying to, even in the schools, rather than encouraging critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
we're telling people that feelings matter more than anything. So
Mm.
don't question it. And I
It's
had this
so-
discussion with someone who was just like adamant that somebody could be born in the wrong body, and I said, well, does that mean that you can be born the wrong race? You can have the wrong racial identity. Could
Yeah,
that mean that I'm
straight
actually
up,
a black
exactly.
person in a white woman's body? And he got really upset with me and said that was racist. And I'm like,
No, it's not.
why
Like, how
is that
different?
racist? But saying that you can be born in the wrong body,
I know.
like, it's such a strange ideology. It's so.
I know. I'm waiting for that to happen. I
again,
want that to happen so people be like, what the hell? I mean, it kind of did happen with that
Rachel
Dolezal
Dolezal.
chick,
Mhm.
and people just kind of forgot about it. I'm like, I really want the trans people to do that so people go, whoa.
Wow.
I mean,
Well,
how
and
is
that's
this
what
different?
I
How is that
actually
different?
noticed. In our group the other day, I actually said we need to get some jerks who are willing to say that they're actually transracial, because most of us are too nice. We don't want to do that because it's so offensive. It's such an offensive proposition
Well,
to do that.
yeah,
But we
also-
need people to do that in order
Yeah.
to push this narrative.
I mean, there's a lot of younger men that are, older men too, let's be real here, that love anime, and a lot of their fantasies that they act out are like young Asian girls, like
Yeah.
Asian schoolgirls. I'm like, isn't that semi-racist too? Like, I mean, it's so gross on every level, but I'm like, what is that about? It's specifically Asian culture, Asian little girl, Asian schoolgirl clothing.
That's a really good point. Now that you mention it, I hadn't really thought of it. But that is
It's
really
huge. Anime
super
is
creepy.
horrible.
Yeah.
Anime has done more destruction than anything.
Well,
But
I
there's
lived I lived in Japan for several years,
Oh.
from 95 to 99, which, gosh, that's been a while ago
Wow.
now. But I remember even back then, the anime, the cartoons,
Oh,
they
yeah.
were very, I mean, I remember sitting on the train across from this guy who was reading a cartoon, a graphic novel that was called Rape Man. And the whole,
Oh my
oh,
god.
did you guys, I just blinked out. You guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just horrified.
Yeah.
No, you actually went blank there for a second, so I think my internet's boofing again. But no, it was Rape Man. It was a cartoon
God.
series called Rape Man, and he just went around raping. And the Japanese schoolgirl trope is a huge one in rape fantasies.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I worked at a girls' school, and we had one little girl when she was in 7th grade. She had this like 35-year-old man who would follow her to school and follow her home again. And we had to send teachers with her
Oh my
to and from the
God.
train because this guy was
This
obsessed
doesn't
with
happen.
her.
This doesn't happen. That
It doesn't
didn't
happen. It never
remember?
happens. Or if
Yeah.
it does happen, it's just one. It's just that one. You're
Oh
just taking
God,
one
I'm so tired of that.
example.
So
and
what?
applying
Are you
it
gonna
to
say
everybody.
all? I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
what is it about people that
And
just
that's what I
don't-
wonder, how many women and girls have to be sacrificed to this ideology before people wake up?
At what point?
Mhm.
At
Exactly.
what
Yeah.
point? Like how many rapes, how many sexual assaults? I mean, it's confounding to me how we got to the
Mhm.
point that we're just
Yeah.
willing to sacrifice women and girls for this ideology.
I think the
Mhm.
mistake is also waiting and for someone else to do something about it. I'm trying to be, use my space to tell people it can really start with you. I mean, I got into this and I was like, what? And I saw people talking about it on the LGB Drop the T on Set It. And that gave me so much confidence because I was like, oh, I'm not alone in this. And I was like, I don't know. Fuck it. Let's start a podcast. I mean, it's not hard. You learn along the way, to be honest. Your voice really does matter. I cannot stress that any more than me doing it now. because I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. I was like, who the fuck's gonna listen to me? There's so many podcasts out there. I was like, I'll create a Patreon and make the lowest tier even lower than what Patreon recommends. Patreon recommends $5. Fuck you, Patreon, by the way, whatever, they booted me. I just didn't really like believe in myself because I'm like, whatever. And all of a sudden I had these people being like, yes, this is amazing, coming out of the woodworks. And I'm like, I mean, I just can't stress to other people that you have, it starts with us, like 100%. It starts with you. You have to have confidence in yourself to believe that I can make a change. And it's not going to probably be like, the next Joe Rogan and making big old changes. But, I mean, your voice still has a huge impact. Look at Beth Stelzer. I mean, even doing the stickering, do it in any way you can. Talking to people about it, just talking about it. And I know it's terrifying, but I don't know. I mean, I have had this revelation recently because listening to Steven Crowder, he's good and bad in some ways, but he's been booted off of YouTube recently, which is huge.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, these people are going after YouTube and these other big tech platforms, and this whole like rat race of we kicked you, we're not gonna really tell you why. By the way, Patreon did that to me. I sent them 4 emails, went to their Twitter. Their Twitter is Patreon help. And I was like, yo, I haven't got a reply because the email at the end of the email, it says, we'll help you with anything we can, blah, blah, blah. No reply. By the way, they paid me out immediately, which tells me they are already like, all right, next, see you later. Wow. They were like, sorry, we can't help you here. You have to email them. I'm like, they're sending me in this. I know what they're doing. I'm like, all right, I get it. Nothing's ever going to come out of it.
Well, Lulu did the same thing to us. Lulu Press.
Hold on, I'm almost done. I swear.
Oh, sorry.
But basically, I realized that I have to start like going to local community people and like, what do the suffragettes do? Didn't they create their own newspaper? I really got to keep it. Fuck big tech then, because it's gonna get worse. I'm telling you. So really, I encourage people to talk with their local community, whatever. What Kelly Jean Posey Parker's doing in UK with the Speaker's Corner once a month, I think is really profound. It's bringing people together in person and speaking out, and it really lights people's fires. At least it does for me just watching it. And I really think that's going to be something that's going to be really powerful and impactful to stopping this. Because, I mean, big tech ain't going to stop. Are you kidding me? They're going to get worse, I'm telling you. So anyway, sorry, go ahead, Maria.
No, I was just agreeing with you. That's what Lulu did to us. They booted our book and won't even respond.
That's the publisher?
Yeah, Lulu
was
Press.
the publisher?
Yeah, that's one. We loaded our book on several different publishers knowing we'd get booted. But Lulu deleted our account, would not even respond to emails. I got Better Business Bureau involved, and they did respond to the Better Business Bureau and said, yes, we're going to pay out their royalties, but we're still waiting to see that. So
wow, they wouldn't even respond with the royalties and whatnot. Oh my God.
No, they have not responded to any emails.
That's the power of being behind like an anonymous or just with the internet. Like, I don't need to respond to you. Listen, we can just carry on doing our own thing. Bye-bye. Like, they don't have any obligation. Like, what? We're our own business. We can do whatever we want. I think that's total BS, this whole YouTube and Twitter. Well, they're allowed to do whatever they want. I'm like, no. Like, listen, I got booted off of Patreon, and I was like, it felt good to have like 7 people support me and make $26 a month, because I was like, hey, people care about me and what I have to say. And it was really crushing to have them take that away. And I went over to Subscribestar, which is basically Patreon, but I'm like, who the fuck's gonna go over to Subscribestar? Like, it's so frustrating. It's not about the money. It's just about like them taking away. I mean, these platforms matter.
They're taking away your voice. Basically, they're taking away our opportunity to share.
Yes, and
our
have other people discover it. Exactly.
And that is really disturbing, because that's what happens in totalitarian regimes. They silence dissent. They silence anybody who doesn't agree with the narrative. And it's important for people out there to know that there are, we are up here jumping up and down and saying, no, this isn't right. But, I first was exposed to the silencing when I went down to the Utah legislature to testify about the therapy ban. They were trying to basically ban the therapy that helped me when I was a child overcome my transgender identity, to manage those difficult feelings.
Which is just really talk therapy.
Right, which is just talk
therapy.
Which is
basically
amazing.
They're saying, like, if a child comes in like me, so the therapist would have been required to affirm my trans identity rather than sort of try to, eke out what might have been causing it. Well, the newspaper reported that, and they said this bill had overwhelming support except for a few people from a hate group. Well, I guess I was part of a hate group because I came and spoke about my experiences. It was the first time I ever spoke publicly about this. Yet when they come out, they get told they're brave and stunning and authentic, and they're completely celebrated. And so when we come out and talk about our experiences, we're called transphobic, we're called bigots, we're told that we deserve to die or get raped or choke on a girl dick. I mean, it really is about silencing us.
It's a cult. It's very much Scientology. Scientology in their little rule book thing is like, go in and go after them hard. Like I mean, their whole theory is like you're allowed to like hurt people because, well, whatever their cult thing is, or whatever that that damn word, I can never say it. I don't know why, because there's 3 T's and I always mess it up. It's just like there's no, it's really just evil. Like, just go after people and go after them hard. And it's just a silencing technique, and it's to instill fear into people, and it's such an entire mess. It's so everything about it is such a lie. It's founded on a lie, lies in the sense of like, oh, this is a fantasy idea. Let's make this real and make laws around something that they can't even freaking define. I'm really tired of the lies everywhere. It's so everything about it is a lie. Everything. And I wish it wasn't true. I mean, like, it's like, I'm not trying to be insincere about these people going through real shit. Like, facts don't care about your feelings. I'm like, feelings do matter, but your feelings are being manipulated by propaganda and bullshit to rob you of your life and rob you of your wallet. It's not at all what you're being told. It's such a pain in the ass because, of course, we do look like the minority. And, I mean, this is being affirmed everywhere. Schools, corporation, Target, I mean, cartoons, music.
Yeah, these are not marginalized. These are not people who are marginalized and oppressed.
I know!
Hello!
Dear Lord, how? I know that one meme is hilarious about, like,
yeah, and
whatever.
I think these people, again, like you said, the feelings are real. I can attest to the fact that I was a very troubled child. I was engaging in self-harming behaviors. I hated myself. I hated my being female. It was a very strong feeling. When I was a kid, oftentimes they dismissed it as penis envy, which I think is interesting. You don't hear that term anymore.
I forgot about that. You're right.
I've heard of that. I've heard that was an older, I don't know who made that up. Or,
but it was just one of the sort of this, like, dismissed, like, you just have
I think it was a guy. I think it was a guy.
It was probably
I think it was one of those.
I
think probably Kinsey. Probably Alfred Kinsey.
I think it was Kinsey. I think it was Kinsey. Yeah, it was Kinsey. What a psycho.
But the fact is that these kids, these kids are having distressing feelings. Their feelings of distress are being amplified. Because rather than getting help and managing them, they're told, "Oh my gosh, you are born in the wrong body, and here's what you need to do." And everybody hates you because of it, and you're so persecuted because of it. You'll probably kill yourself because of it. I mean, what a message.
And your parents, you need to separate yourself from your parents.
Anybody who doesn't affirm you is dangerous. That words are now violence. These are really dangerous messages to be giving to kids.
So predatory,
incredibly disempowering. And
predatory. And Lindsay touched on it a little bit ago. We need to remember this is about money. This is about money and politics. There are billions and billions of dollars to be made at this. Detransitioners who went through medicalization will talk about the tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars they spent on these body modifications. Where's that going? Into the pharmaceutical companies' pockets, into the cosmetic surgeons' pockets. Of course, they want to propagate this. Everybody likes to say, oh, the American Pediatric Association, is behind this. No, 37 members of it are behind this. The task force that wrote the guidance is behind it. And the 2 main doctors, the one who wrote it and the main consultant, both have financial ties to gender clinics. Follow the money. If you want to know what happened, follow the money. And there's money all over this.
Yes. People try to tell me it's like fear mongering. I mean, some people just really don't want to believe it. I think it makes sense when if someone were to buy into this. And here's what's so devious about it is that, say you were a supporter of LGB rights and whatnot, and we went through all that, and I don't know whether or not you were LGB yourself. I think that those same people, a lot of them have been confused and convinced and lied to about the T being tacked on now is exactly the same. So for you to convince them that the T is not at all LGB, even freaking remotely, they're going to be very resistant because it's like, how dare you because, well, someone else said this is real.
Mhm.
It's kind of like you trying to, because they always try to conflate it like, oh, you're a homophobe, or they use, transphobe again. It's the same
Mhm.
fucking mechanics, but
Yeah.
it's like, God, it's so disingenuous. It's not the same thing, but it's
Mhm.
just, imagine trying to convince someone, or not convince, I hate using that word, but just showing them the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be really resistant and be like, oh, you're fear mongering. This is BS. This is bogus.
This is
Or
not
you're a
what-
bigot. Or you're a bigot. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many times I've heard people say that us not wanting men in our bathrooms is like segregation. And I'm trying to suggest that women wanting our own sex-based
Mhm.
spaces is like us trying to enforce Jim Crow laws, us being
Mhm.
raped.
Did you know that Patreon said that in my letter? It said I was
Really?
enforcing segregational content. I was like,
Oh my
that's a
gosh.
first. I
You
was
know,
like,
it's
so
like-
I'm
it's like-
clueless about that. I don't know what that, I'm like, what do you, I'm like,
Yeah, it's
first, I've
because
only
they're-
heard that term. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that was something that came up in that Zoom conference that Maria and I were on. That they're really trying to suggest that this all comes from white supremacy. That it's all.
Because I was like, the only time I've
based
heard of segregational is like race related. I was like,
and it is
segregational?
race related because us discriminating against men in our
God.
bathrooms is exactly the same as whites discriminating against blacks coming into their bathrooms.
Oh my
Well,
God.
when my kids
That's
were
what they're
still,
saying.
when my kids were still in public school, I've now pulled all my kids and they're all homeschooled because I
Yeah.
don't trust the public schools anymore. When they're still in the
Yeah.
public schools, I went to my kids' high school and I went into the English room and there were all of these posters for civil rights. They had done a civil rights unit. All the kids had made posters. Every one of those posters had race relations. It had blacks and whites. It had Native Americans.
Oh my God.
It had men and women, and it had LGBTQ, and those together. I no longer put those together. I say LGB and TQ because they are very different.
Yeah.
But that is what they are conflating. And I think about what you said about just smacking the TQ on with the LGB and how wrong that is.
Such bullshit.
It's like we've got a field full
They
of
cancel
horses.
each other
We've got
out. Trans actually cancels out that.
Exactly.
It does.
Yeah,
But we've
there's
got,
no such-
we've got a field of horses and we throw a lion in there and go, no, it's got 4 legs. It's got a head. It's got 2 ears. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. There's no problem putting that lion in the field full of horses. That's the situation we're in, both
Yeah.
with the LGB and the TQ being slapped together and men going into women's bathrooms and men competing in women's sports. It's the same thing. It's throwing a lion in with the horses and saying, what could be wrong with this?
And again, it's that privileging men's feelings,
Yes.
which is, and in general, privileging feelings above reality, which is again problematic. I mean, I'm wondering, are 45-year-old men going to be able to start identifying as 8-year-olds?
I know.
I mean, and I know people are going to be like, oh, that's totally different. That has nothing to do with this. Well, it's basically disbelieving reality based on feelings. And we all know that we have feelings that aren't valid. And I wonder, like, if a kid comes home from school and is like, boy, nobody likes me because I'm ugly, are we supposed to start being like, oh yeah, you are ugly, no wonder nobody likes you? I mean, is that really where we're going with this?
Yeah.
And again, I don't think
exactly.
it is. I think that, I think there's something far more insidious here, which is Big Pharma is making so much money off of this. This is, when I was doing my research, I started to see, puberty blockers used to be used for endometriosis, and then they found that that it had horrible side effects. So they had to find a new market. Testosterone used to be given to men who were sort of losing their virility, and then they found out it had horrible side effects. So they had to find another market. Estrogen used to be given to postmenopausal women to help with menopausal symptoms. Well, they found out that it caused some problems. So, they need a new market. Sorry. And so basically, these are incredibly powerful drugs that they needed to find a consumer base for, and boy, did they ever find one.
Yeah, give it to the kids who are the most, they don't know. They don't have a huge grasp on reality. They're literally growing into their own, like,
and tell the parents that they're bad parents if they don't give it. If you don't give this to your children, you're withholding medicine that they need. You are withholding. Yeah.
And you're responsible for their suicide.
Oh Lord, total emotional manipulation.
Yeah,
through and through, the entire, all of it.
Well, and I keep thinking, when I saw that Johanna Olsen Kennedy changed the age at which she was giving testosterone to 8 years old, I'm thinking 8 years old kids still believe in the tooth fairy.
Oh my God.
Like
What grade is
they're
that?
8 years old is young. That's like third grade, right? I mean, it's young.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so according to the WPATH guidelines, you're not supposed to give testosterone until 16, which we know they're not adhering to. But assuming they were, an 8-year-old child being on puberty blockers for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 for 9 years. That's horrifying because generally speaking, they try to keep people on Lupron, which is the main puberty blocker they use, for less than 3 years. It's not considered safe for more than 3 years.
And it has such effects. It demineralizes the bones. It causes joint
pretty
issues.
Damn important. That's the literal frame of your freaking body. You only get one body. You're gonna mess with the forever. This is permanent. This isn't like temporary. It's not like
we're gonna have
eye.
like 16-year-olds with debilitating arthritis. I mean,
and osteoporosis.
I've seen some mom rejoice in their daughter go through menopause. I'm like, what? Like that's something to celebrate? It's like who can outdo the I don't know what the word, the blank Olympics, the you know what
oppression.
I mean? Like yes, or just
it is. I want to call it the Munchausen Olympics because that's kind of what it looks like. Is Munchausen by
that's
proxy?
The word.
I mean, that's it. When I see what these parents are doing, I either think A, 100%. They have Munchausen by proxy, or B, they are incredibly homophobic and they're worried that their gender nonconforming kid is going to grow up and be gay. Those are the two things that I automatically think about. The third thing is that you just have parents who have recognized that if they can come out with a brave and authentic child, they can work the system. I mean, I'm seeing some of the things that these kids are getting. I've been on committees where they've been going through applications and they will just sort of throw out the white male applicants. And then they'll be like, oh, here's one who's transgender. They don't even look at it. They just put it in the approved pile for scholarships and such. I mean, this is how absurd it is that we are going to provide benefits to people based on their identity without even looking at their, at their work, at their qualifications.
I think social media has ruined all of us. It's like people trying to outwoke each other by, my kid's more oppressed or more special because I discovered mine was transgender when it was still in my belly.
Right, in utero, it was communicating.
And we've heard that from parents. But I do want to, I completely agree with everything you're saying, Erin, but I do want to just speak out for there are a lot of parents who they don't know there's another option. When this happens to a parent and they go to the pediatrician gives them a list of gender clinics. They go to the classroom teacher, to the school principal. They say, oh, best practice is say you have to affirm or your child will commit suicide. I mean, it's the emotional manipulation. They go to their neighbor and say, my child told me that she's transgender. Oh, that's wonderful. You're affirming, right? Because if you're not affirming, you're an awful, hideous parent. So there are a lot of parents who they don't know that they can do something else, or if they do know, it's too hard. It's swimming upstream. It's too hard. So
imagine taking people that you were told or I believe trusted in your life, like doctors or whatever. I don't know if you could ever really trust them, but you know what I'm saying? Like you trust these people. I don't know who said this. It's like the people that you trust the most is like your doctors and your teachers. Now imagine that they're not even, because I do believe a lot of them are doing this because they have compassion and they're like, listen, I heard from what I heard is that they'll commit suicide. And like, this is the correct thing to do. And they're convincing themselves because they also don't know either. It's just this whole world of confusion.
Or they're worried that they'll get piled on if they do something different.
Exactly.
And we're seeing, there are doctors who are like, I can't speak out about this because I don't want to lose my practice. I don't want to lose my family. I don't want to put my kids at risk. That's how insidious this is. That they will try to get you fired.
They're like, oh, I can't. Or some people go
they're
anonymous.
so careful. And it's
even with the
really,
people.
It's
Or I
crazy.
was trying to interview some people that have intersex and that condition, and they're like, they don't feel comfortable showing their face or even coming on and having their voice, because I'm like, doesn't that say everything? I'm not surprised at all, and I get it.
Well, and I feel I talk to detransitioners and they feel so betrayed because the people who were supposed to be protecting them actually harmed them. And so how do they recover from that? How do they regain the trust? I mean, there's just so much betrayal there.
I know.
And then to add it all up, if they speak out, they get piled on. I mean, these,
and you wonder where the suicide rates come from. Give me a break. It's so disingenuous. It's just such a, it's I can't imagine. It's horrifying. It's shocking. The kids have no freaking chance. Like it's so. I cannot believe this is happening. It is being so normalized with people like Ellen Page, woman.
Yeah.
You know, that whole photoshopped image of the.
Yeah, she had to have gotten. She must have gotten abdominal implants.
It's either that or it's a total male
Photoshop.
body and like put on top or something. Listen, like they have these people that are pushing this agenda have so much money. Plus, she has Hollywood behind her backing this. Of course, they have the money to Photoshop this crap. But like, I forgot where I was going with that. I don't remember where I was going with that.
Yeah, she couldn't look like. I mean, she just had serious surgery. Mastectomies are incredibly invasive.
I don't even think she had it. I think that's all a shock.
Oh, interesting.
I wonder. When I heard that she was going to get that, I was like, I don't think so.
I wonder if she
but
did.
I'm not. Maybe
but
I don't know.
Even if she did, she couldn't be working out. You don't get to work out and build your ass
body.
like that.
I know.
After surgery, you can't.
I had anorexia for 6 years. I was into that whole pro-ana shit online. I was obsessed looking at my body, and I also actually became like a vegan bodybuilder after that. I know, I'm fine now. Listen, but I look at that body, that photo, and it does not make sense because those abs are like really thick and protruding. And her arms are extremely emaciated. There's no mass, and I'm like, if you
her legs are just
and if you can't, like, if you work out one part of your body, you're gonna see a little bit more body and meat everywhere else. So I'm like, this is visually not adding up. Where did her waist go? Like all of a sudden, it's a male square. I'm like, this is bullshit. Everything about this whole gender identity cult is a lie. So I'm like, this photo is again a lie, which is so obviously horrific because kids are like, oh, I can look like that and I can look like a boy. I don't even know, like look like a boy. She's a woman. She's still a woman. No matter what you do, she'll always be a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so sad. And again, for me, it comes down to the kids, the message that we're giving to the kids.
Yeah.
You know, adults on some level have some autonomy. If they want to go ruin their body, then, you know, on some level they get that choice. But for, you know, Hollywood stars to be propagating this myth is so damaging. There are girls who are going to look at that, like you said, and think, oh, you know, I'm kind of uncomfortable with the attention I'm getting with my breasts because these assholes keep ogling me. I think I'm just going to get them cut off, and then I won't have to worry about it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Plus, America looks at celebrities like they're freaking gods. I mean, how just it's so evil, like to use celebrities. She's not even that big of a celebrity, but still, I know people like for the Billie Eilish thing that would fuck me up because I know that girls looked up to her, past tense, because Billie always wore like really baggy, not girly, sexy clothing. It was just baggy and really honestly comfortable, to be honest. I'm like, that looks freaking comfortable all the time. That was her aesthetic. Overnight, total bimbo, prostitute looking thing, blonde, like bombshell. Nothing was authentic about that. Even the writing in the article, if it feels good, do it. Oh my God, how dangerous. It's so awful. It's so awful. And I also have this whole conspiracy about the Disney thing, but whatever. Just setting people
I know, and
up
that's the problem, I think, is that
they get you in and loving it.
We can't even trust our doctors. If they're lying so profoundly about something as basic as sex, then what do we trust? And I mean, to me, that's
look up ElsaGate. You'll start seeing these things come together. I swear to you, everything holy. I wish I was wrong. Yeah. But I think that these things are so doubly awful because they, you know, Billie's thing, for example, girls identify or like not identify, but like love and look up to her as an icon because she isn't so girly. And then they're deceived completely, like when she does that. So I'm like, how confusing is that for a young girl to like look up to another celebrity or musician and be like, what? You know what I mean? Like it's confusing and terrible for me to look at. I'm not even never was a Billie fan, but I'm like, God, I can't imagine seeing that. Like, I don't even know. I'm not a young girl. I don't know what that does to the girl's mind. Like,
some of the girls will follow suit. Some of them will say, "Oh, this must be the cool thing to do because this is what Billie did. So this is what I'm going to do now."
It's grooming behavior.
It absolutely is grooming. Yeah.
I think Billie was groomed 100%. And anyway, whatever. I mean, any woman that's in Hollywood or entertainment industry is being used as a puppet. 100%. Like I just don't understand actresses that are like still acting in the game. I'm like, what? I think they've disassociated like completely.
But you know, I was writing a novel a few years ago, and I actually got to talk to somebody who is in the music industry. Like I randomly sent her this email, like hoping maybe she would answer my question. And she called me and I got to talk to her.
Nice.
And I was working through a plot, but she told me about how much power the record labels and the producers have over these artists. And she said artists have at least 5 different contracts. There's the record label, there's their agent, there's the producer. And she said every one of those contracts has different ins and outs. I mean, she was just telling me these stories that I was like, I don't ever want one of my children going anywhere near the music industry, anywhere near the entertainment industry. But when I saw that Billie Eilish cover, I thought,
so bad.
When I looked at the Billie Eilish cover, I thought she didn't have any choice. She was told that's what she's going to do. And I thought the same thing about the twerking girl, Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus, she was 21 when that happened. And everybody was like, oh, she's so terrible. And she didn't have any choice. Somebody told her to do that. Somebody convinced her that that was a good thing to do. That wasn't her choice.
Yeah, I guess I should be clear that I'm not like mad at Billie. I'm like, I feel really sad for her. It's obviously the industry and the men that are controlling her 100%. Her brother writes her songs for her and they're disgusting. On My Knees and Daddy and just gross shit, like absolutely vile. You're saying something about the celebrity thing. I forgot. Dang it. I don't remember. Crap.
Well, I cut you off, Erin, when I popped back in. What were you saying?
Oh, no, you're fine. I don't remember.
I know, I'm looking
for making up for me cutting out.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that I keep thinking about Buck Angel. You know, when we're talking about the entertainment industry and what happens, and here we have this woman who has transitioned, who adamantly insists that she is happy doing this porn that is really degrading. And somebody actually showed me an image.
Is she still doing it?
Yeah, she's still doing it. Somebody recently showed me an image of Buck giving an older man a blowjob, and she looked mortified and degraded, and she was not enjoying it. I mean, she was not enjoying it. It was Maria, I think you saw this image.
And I can't get the image out of my head.
I can't get it out of I mean, the look on her eyes of just complete, like, it looked like she was at about as low as you can get. But I mean, she has to keep insisting, oh no, this is great.
Well, look at her body. She's gone all the way in. Can you imagine?
She has to, but that's what I worry about girls. I keep thinking about these girls who have assumed this transgender identity. They go into men's bathrooms, and if they get sexually assaulted, they're not going to say anything, because if they do, then people will be like, well, it's a girl in a boy's bathroom. It's going to undermine.
You kind of brought it on yourself, right?
You kind of brought it on
I
yourself.
See
yeah. I mean, I just feel like over and over again, this message is of just, vulnerable women being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Makes me so sad when I think about Buck and this message of I'm so empowered. I'm like,
I know.
That is not empowerment.
Yeah. I try to burst her bubble a little bit occasionally. Like the whole Girl Scout story I went into previously. It was just really upsetting. I'm like, because she was like, oh, I forgot that I was a boy. I'm like, you're not. You're not. You're not. You're a woman. I mean, it's just weird. I don't believe in that true trans thing at all. I'm not hateful about these people, but I really don't like. I don't know. I just wish they would. I know that some people are just lost people.
The true trans thing is incredibly dangerous, because what it suggests is that there are people who are born in the wrong body. Once you accept that supposition, all bets are off. I mean, everything goes out the window. This is a spiritual belief now. And so I can definitely get behind people who say I have gender dysphoria and I'm struggling. I'm going to have lots of compassion for that. But as soon as you kind of make it to that next level of true trans, that there are people who are actually born in the wrong body, all bets are off. That is now a religious or a spiritual belief, and it's in no way
deny that too. It's so bizarre. I'm like, how are you denying that? Listen, that's what a religion is. It's a spiritual belief. Like they're just, I don't know, they just deny any truth. Honestly, it's all lies everywhere. Well, where can we find y'all's books?
That's a good question, and it changes because periodically we get banned and blocked. So
the best place to look is the PEC website, partnersforethicalcare.com. Go there. There is a page for ERIN'S book. There's a page for my book, and it tells. We try to keep it up to date. Where you can buy it from. You can buy it right from our website, and we will send you a copy. They are on Amazon. They are on Barnes & Noble. And those are the 3 places they're available right now.
Oh, so are you guys using the same publishers or whatnot, kind of doing the same path with that?
Yeah, well, what we're doing is trying to keep it available in a couple different places
Yeah.
with the expectation
Smart.
that it will, that Amazon, it's not unreasonable to think that Amazon is going to take down our books at some point. They took down Maria's book after 2 days of it being published. And then there was such an outcry. People, lots of people called in and complained and got it back up. But I sort of feel like we're flying under the radar right now, that at some point, one of the big trans activist organizations gonna find out about it and be up in arms, and it's likely that it will be brought down from Barnes and Noble and Amazon. So that's one of the reasons that we're offering it on Partners for Ethical Care website, is sort of as an insurance policy in case they are banned and blocked. And there are some people who just do not want to go to Amazon, because Amazon hasn't been a great company. So there are lots of people who are like, I won't buy from Amazon. So we want to give them an
inclusive at
option.
the expense of excluding women's voices. Ridiculous. You're not inclusive. Total lies yet again. So did Amazon bring your book back, like the book, Maria? Because I know they brought back the audiobook. Why was there a delay on them once they brought it back? They brought back the audiobook, but then there was a delay on the book itself.
We don't have the audiobook out yet. We have an ebook. We have an ebook,
that's what I meant. Okay,
and the paperback. And they censored both of those about 2 to 3 days in, and then they brought them back. And I'm giving Amazon the benefit of the doubt about this because the book was out of stock for a long time, which doesn't make sense because it's print on demand. So I actually talked to a tech at Amazon, and they said, when somebody orders a copy and then cancels their order, that copy has already been put through the printer, like it's already gone in the process of going through the printer. So we put that in the stock room, and then it looks like we have one in stock. Then somebody orders that, and then the algorithm says, it's out of stock. And so I think there was a little glitch happening there. And with taking the book down, I think everybody who ordered in that period right before it went down, I think they got into this glitch, because there were probably dozens of people who were like, I ordered this book 3 weeks ago. It still hasn't been sent. One friend of mine actually called Amazon, and they said, we're so sorry. Your order got stuck in this sort of no man's land. So the tech canceled that order, started a new order. My friend got it the next day. And I think there were a lot of people that were kind of stuck in that time warp loop thing. So I'm giving Amazon the benefit of the doubt on that.
I have had stuff with Amazon happen where I'm like, what? It says it's ordered, but it didn't ship, but it's also delayed. And then but the pattern company, it was sewing pattern company on their website has it. It was like this whole weird.
Yeah, sometimes I think their
I think it's both.
software doesn't work. But one of the things that was infuriating with Lulu is that they offer some of the most heinous books available. Rape books, slavery books, torture books. Women being tortured, all kinds of really disturbing, misogynistic, racist kinds of books. Lots of lesbians being raped kind of books. Really, really offensive content.
Who would write that nonsense?
And the fact that they're willing to offer that, and they don't see that as problematic, but a parenting book to help kids on a safer pathway is considered inappropriate. That's, again, so infuriating. And that's, again, an issue with Patreon too, that some of the people that they allow on there are incredibly misogynistic.
And Patreon's an SF, so go figure. God.
But if all else fails, we've got we've got PDF copies of both my book and ERIN'S book on the website. That's been sort of my fallback. Like if everything else gets canceled, we can sell PDF copies. And surprisingly, that's been a really popular option with my book. A lot of people have bought the PDF so that they can download it, print it at home.
Good. Yeah.
So it will remain in circulation one way or the other. But right now it's available in ebook, paperback, and PDF download. And we're working on an audiobook.
Nice. Erin, is yours also a PDF available?
Yeah, and
something.
actually, it's funny because we sort of went back and forth about a children's book as a PDF, but ultimately we want to get this information out there.
Exactly.
With both Maria and I's books, 100% of the profits goes right back to PEC.
Yeah,
We
that's awesome.
so that it will continue to help us do this work. And in all honesty, if somebody did take it and printed it off and shared it with somebody else, if it helped that other person, I would be ecstatic. And so I think that is our motivation behind this is to help parents, help kids, help teachers, just to sort of break down the nonsense that's out there and let people know there are different pathways that can be taken that are a lot healthier.
Yep, 100%. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for doing what you do with PEC, with your books, everything you do. I adore you, and just PEC 100%. And thanks for coming on and spending the time with me. You guys are always fantastic and love it. Love it all.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, because you're putting it out there, and we are so appreciative. You're doing great work.
We love you right back, Lindsay.
Aww.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, ladies.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Bye-bye. Bye, Maria.
Don't forget to also hit subscribe and hit that little bell button so you know when my next video goes live. I appreciate it. So does Clippy. Clippy, Clippy, Clippy. He's like, no.